And it also can feel that way for you too, like the activity, the get up and go, the energy that you had, you're essentially like the battery that you have that you've been running on might feel for you really drained. Like I just don't have the energy to do things, or that I'm actually trying to do things, but it's just not flowing the way that it normally flows. Aloha everybody, and welcome to the Wild Wahine. I am Kaylani. Today we're talking about Mars retrograde. It's here today, and my morning started off with like not really so much in my life, which I'm grateful for, but I've had several things that I read on the Facebook, on social media. I've had friends texting with just lots of, stuff happening, friendships going haywire, relationships kind of falling apart, sickness, illness, there's a lot of stuff going on right now. So what I'd like to do today is actually just put a lot of Mars retrograde in Aries into perspective. We're going to be in this energy for almost like 3 months, so we have a lot of time to kind of go through the details and the specific points where it's really going to hit, especially when it hits some of those squares in September, October, and in November. So we'll be discussing those as we get a little bit closer. Hey, how are you, Gabby? It's so nice to see you. We'll be hitting those, as we get a little bit closer. But I wanted to just have like an overview of what to expect and kind of what to look out for, because energetically, there's a lot that's happening. And this is actually nothing new, because we've been in the Mars shadow for a few weeks now, so we've probably been feeling it either, so let me actually start from a little bit the beginning about like Mars and the planet and what that means for you, and generally speaking, and then we'll talk about what happens when it goes retrograde. So Mars, and also the retrograde time is today, September 9th, all the way through November 13th or November 14th, depending upon where you are and what country you are in. So essentially, September 9th through November 13th, 14th is this Mars retrograde. Mars rules all of the things that have to do with identity and self and passion, lust, power, drive, your internal drive to get up and go and to do things. With Mars being in Aries, which is a sign of its rulership, it's actually like really happy in that place. In Aries, same thing. It's all about like warrior energy. It rules athletes and surgeons and the military and police officers, anybody that kind of sort of like getting up and doing things and having like activity and controlling things. It has to do with like surgeries and knives and guns and all of the things that right now we really don't want to necessarily have to deal with or think about, but there are nevertheless things that are in our lives right now that we have to deal with everything that's going on our planet. So passion, heat, anything that's hot, anything that is radiating, all of the fires that we're seeing right now. I had a friend of mine, really good friend of mine, potentially having to leave her home yesterday because there was a big fire, and that was like in Idaho. And so there's just so many people that I actually see on my social media that are all over the place that are dealing with, pandemics. We here in Hawaii are on another lockdown. Our lockdown is going to be extended for 2 more weeks. So it's kind of like, all of the things that like a lot of mythologies and a lot of religions talk about, like the fire, the flood, the plague, and so there's a lot of fear in the space right now, and people are really feeling like, what is going on? We're being really accosted by so many different situations. And one of the things that I want to tell everybody is we go through these periods. We've been through a Mars retrograde period before. Mars has been retrograde 2018, and I'm actually going to talk about that in a later video about the other times Mars has been in retrograde and what you were dealing with at those points, and are you kind of touching that again during this time, because that can be very useful to you in terms of how you work with this energy. I know for myself, in 2018, and I don't have the dates here in front of me, but I will, like I said, on my next video, I was kind of in between, like, okay, am I moving back home? Am I going to stay on the mainland? And I was trying actively to get all of these things done. And I was actually originally supposed to move to California for a little bit before I came back home to Hawaii, and that didn't work out. And so I essentially was like kind of pushing I had planned all these things. I was pushing up against them, and like nothing was working out for me. Like everything that I had planned, it just was like, no, 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 no. And I'm actually incredibly grateful for that, because all of those no's resulted in like a big yes and a much better life and a much better like flow of things. But at the time, I couldn't understand why. I felt like I was like really pushing up against like a brick wall. And so that's what Mars retrograde looked like for me in 2018. And it also can feel that way for you too, like the activity, the get up and go, the energy that you had, you're essentially like the battery that you have that you've been running on might feel for you really drained. Like I just don't have the energy to do things, or that I'm actually trying to do things, but it's just not flowing the way that it normally flows. And that is part of kind of that retrograde energy. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the like things that we might see in the broader sense when we're dealing with Mars retrograde energy in terms of like our world and what we're going through. We talked a little bit about like the fires and the infection is another thing. Mars also rules like sickness and things that are inflamed and things that are kind of like festering and things, and like sometimes if you get a cut and if it's not like washed properly, it gets hot, and that's when infection has happened. And so all of those kinds of things, surgeries, we talked a little bit about ruling surgeons. So one thing that a lot of people say during a Mars retrograde, if you are potentially going to get an elective surgery, to actually maybe wait until after the retrograde is over. Now of course you have to use your best judgment in that, and I am not a doctor, so I cannot tell you what to do. But if you have a chance, if it's something that you're choosing, obviously nothing if it's like, pertinent and you need to do it right now. But if you're choosing to have some procedures or something like that done, possibly pushing it back might be a better idea. If it's something that you can't do and you have to actually get it done now, just giving yourself enough space for you to heal up is important, because your healing process might take a little bit longer. The glorious jealousy, the glorious lust, envy, all of these like hot, sometimes negative emotions are associated. So that like brings us into our relationships, and it really brings us into like when we think about it on a macro level, like with what's going on in the world. Aries and Mars really represents the individual, our individual selves, what we do, how we move through life, our willpower, how we want things done. It's very much about the I. It's not about the we. So you are going to see, and we have been seeing it for a while now, because Mars has been in Aries, I want to say for like a few months now anyway. So there's been this whole like question just in our world right now about the individual versus the collective, individual rights, my right to do this, my right to do that. And then also we need to think about, what's best for everybody. Are we thinking about marginalized groups? We need to mask up so that everybody doesn't get the infection. And it makes sense astrologically right now that we're just having such a big battle with, like a person thinking about like their individual self and not so much thinking about the collective. What's interesting about that though is the opposite of Aries is Libra, which is a season we're actually about to go into. Right now we're in Virgo season. I think Libra, we go into Libra season on September 20th, if I'm not incorrect about that date. So Libra is the opposite of Aries. Libra is all about partnership. It's all about the collective, and it's all about balancing things out. So we have these two energies right now that are kind of sort of like in this battle of the wills, and how are we going to work that? When Mars goes retrograde, it really has a tendency to go deep within and feel like I am going to fight against this thing. Now we have Saturn, which is also in Capricorn in retrograde, which we've talked about because we've been in that energy for a while. We'll be in that until the end of the year. Saturn is like Big Daddy energy that's sitting on top and basically controlling everything. It is the energy of the system, of politics, of government and things like that. So we have a lot of individuals against government, individuals trying to, change the way things are done. All of these things are things that we're going through. And so for us to see them, we know that they're there. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I really love astrology, is because it tells me that even in a space where it feels really scary, in a space where it feels really uncomfortable, it's all actually aligned. These are all the things that are happening right now. These are also cycles too. All of these cycles have happened before. So we're just going through the cycle. We will get through it. We will get to the other end, but understand that those are the energies. And also understand that, no matter what side you're on, like, you're still feeling the same thing, whether you're feeling oppression by the government, whether you feel like your individuality is being oppressed by the government, whatever that situation is. The most important thing is to make sure that you're picking your battles properly and that you're doing so in a way that's going to affect the change that you want. And almost always the best way, especially during a Mars retrograde, is not going headfirst into a fight because all sides lose at this time. The impetus is going to be there. The frustration level is going to be there. The irritation level is going to be there. And unfortunately, we will see more of some of the incidents that we have been seeing when it's been in shadow, which has been really, really, really sad in terms of people like beating each other up, people getting shot, people getting injured. Like I said, Mars rules the police and the military and all of that. And we've been seeing a lot of that kind of violence happening to the protesters. We've been seeing counter protesters beat up protesters accosting. There's just been a lot of crazy right now with these systems and with everything that's going on. That's nothing that's actually going to go away. And especially during the retrograde period, that's something that might come to a point. As a matter of fact, it will come to a point, especially on certain times when we're reaching those really tough squares to Capricorn and those squares especially to Pluto. So I'll be talking about that as we unpack it for like the 3-month period. But I just think that this is a time right now where you're going to really want to be careful. You want to be careful where you are. You want to be careful, what you're doing. I'm not saying that this is a time to back down, but I am saying that there is times where you want to stand in your truth and fight, because there are times you have to do that, especially if you're defending yourself or fighting for what you believe in, especially if there's been a wrong. But there's also times where you could be fighting for something and maybe it's not really authentically like right. You want to just make sure that you're checking in with yourself, that your sources are correct and that you know what you're talking about and that you feel good about what you're doing. But also sometimes there are times to disengage. Sometimes there are times to actually step away and kind of go back another day. You've been outmanned, I think of the Art of War, you definitely need to know your enemy. I think that's important. I think a lot of people are, going in head first without understanding. And I mean, that tends to be more like Aries energy, but Aries also is a technical fighter, like my son watches MMA a lot and he has me watching MMA and he'll always talk about like the technical fighter, which is the fighter who's actually kind of looking at the holes and trying to see where the openings are, and that's when they kick and that's when they hit. And that's the type of fighting I'm talking about, being really specific, not just going in there like, that kind of sort of thing. You really actually want to see the opening and you want to hit at the weakness. So if you do choose to get into your warrior phase or get into your warrior mode, you want to actually know that you can land the punch and then quickly get out so you don't get hit and keep your hands up, right? Because that's really important, that you're protecting yourself. And we're going to get to that in terms of tips and how we can best like kind of navigate through this energy. But that was one of the things I want to talk about. Let's see. I'm looking at my notes now. Let's see. So inside, in terms of, so those are all kind of the big things that will happen on the outside in terms of the world and what's going on, and just, protect yourself. If you're out there protesting, please, please, please protect yourself. Please, please, please. If there's a curfew, and if, go in, this would be a really good time for you to not stay out past curfew. If there's a possibility for shenanigans or crazy, then it will happen during this time. So you can still go in, you can go early, you can protest, you can wear whatever, shirt you want to wear that says whatever it is that you believe in. I'm not telling people to not stand up for themselves and speak for themselves. But what I am saying is when things start to break down, when it gets late at night, when people have had a few drinks, when somebody looks a little crazy and a little off and you're like, maybe I shouldn't provoke. That's what you don't want to do. You're not trying to poke and provoke the wild beast right now, because the wild beast will attack. There are many times it won't. Now is the worst time to do that. So you just want to make sure that you're doing what you need to do, what you feel like you need to do, but you're staying safe right now. And you're doing it at times that are safe for yourself, because it's risky. And Mars also just rules like accidents and just, things that weren't supposed to happen that kind of happen. And in a retrograde period, you want to be careful. You want to be careful when you're driving. You want to just make sure that you're driving the speed limit. Like for me, I'm like, for the 3 months, I don't speed. I mean, I'm in Hawaii, so it's not like there are all these roads for us to speed on. But we have roads obviously, but it's not like, drag racing or anything. But sometimes I'll just be like, because I have a lot of fire in my chart. So I'm just like, okay, make sure I'm signaling. And, you know, like, so it's a little bit kind of sort of the kid gloves are on right now, you know, the kitten heels I'm tapping around in, you know, it's not stiletto time for me right now. I'm gonna break my neck. So that's the kind of sort of stuff. You just want to be a little bit more, cautious, you know, in what you do. So in terms of the inside stuff, in terms of like what are things that can affect you personally with your friendships and your relationships, like I said, I mean, look, we're about to go into Libra and Libra season, and right now, you know, Mercury's in Libra, so I think like in terms of how we communicate with our partners is going to be really important. A lot of irritations and things that really piss you off are going to come up. And I think the patience that you might have had to deal with it is not really going to be there anymore. And so I think like constant communication, again, you know, whenever we're in a sign that has that much heat with Mars as being the planet in Aries, the easiest thing to do is actually to just kind of slow down and calm down and talk about things, and just try to do, I made a video before, it's on my YouTube channel, about anger. A really great time to watch that video because it talks about anger and righteous anger and how to work with anger in a positive way so that it's not kind of sort of consuming you, and how it can be empowering. But one of the things, you know, that's a takeaway from that is to do, I mentioned a walk and talk. If you're having a disagreement with somebody and you're having a rough time and you're not sure, like, you know, you're just butting heads and you're like indoors and you're like in a small space, to like go outside and walk and then kind of like walk through your issues and your problems. So that could be like a really fantastic thing for you to do at this time when you're working in your interpersonal relationships. You just have to understand also too that there's going to be this like weird energy, this weird like ebb and flow. Sometimes you're going to feel like you have so much energy and you're on it and you're ready to go, and the next minute you're going to feel like, oh my gosh, I'm so exhausted, I don't know what I'm doing, I don't feel like I can get up and do anything. And so that could be it too. It's just, it's like this, it's like before a battery dies, how it kind of like will have energy and then doesn't have energy, and it kind of goes back and forth. And that's the kind of feel, and you might feel that too in your interpersonal relationships. A lot of times it just feels like Mars retrograde for you can really feel like you're just pushing a rock uphill. It's just this hard thing that you're doing and you're not sure like how you can do it, and it feels so exhausting and it feels really difficult. Oh, hello, archetypes and cardstock, thanks for joining. And it feels like it's such a difficult thing for you to kind of move towards your goal, you know, and it feels like heavy and it feels slow. For some of us, Mars retrograde might feel that way. It might feel like we don't have any energy. It's just like really hard to get anything done and to focus and like not know how to like move forward. And so one of the things that you can do if you're feeling that way is to just take that time. It's okay to like not be active and be on it and to be on top of everything. And I talked about that before too in one of my warrior, I think it was the last video I did, or last two videos I did. We talked about the warrior energy. I've been really talking about that a lot because we're in it, and about the time that it takes to, you know, muster up the energy to, you know, fight and to stand up for yourself, and how sometimes you just need to like let that go and let somebody else come forward and fight and kind of lick your wounds and heal yourself and then come back to the situation. So if you feel like you're really like butting heads, or you just don't have the energy to like go at it with somebody, it's okay to just say, you know, at a later time I need to discuss this. This isn't something that I want to do right now. A couple tips for you guys, and like I said, this is just an overview of Mars retrograde. We're going to get deeper into it because we're in it for 3 months, but I just wanted to give you a few tips because already today people are like, so many emails and so many messages. So a few tips in terms of what we can, you know, there's not a lot of things that we can do on a large scale. You know, I think a lot of people are doing what they can do: vote, vote, vote. Vote, vote. We all know that. If you don't like things, vote. If you don't like things, write, protest, change, start a organization that can help with that. I mean, obviously those are some of the larger things that we can do, but unless we're politicians or people who are in power, you know, we're kind of limited in terms of how we can change systems other than doing the things that we're doing right now and talking about it and having some sort of like open communication about what's going on. I actually will post, because I found a couple really great groups actually online that were keeping lines of communication open for like conservatives and Republicans and progressives and everybody else in between, where they were having these like open debates online. And I was like, I haven't seen something like this, because everything I see is so incredibly polarized. And really, you know, again, moving into Libra season and going into that time, it's really all about like hearing both sides and like arguing and debating from your point, but also like letting the person speak and hearing. And I think that when conversation breaks down is when we have these issues. It's never going to be the fact that everybody's going to get along. We kind of sort of already know that. But what has happened now is that conversation is completely broken down, and there's so much lies and conspiracy theory and all kinds of crazy that it's just no communication happening. So I'm going to post those because I thought that they were really some really good groups that really have a lot of people like discussing things like normal human beings, like we should be doing. So that's one of the things, is to just to be open to discussion, be open to hearing sides of a story that's not yours. Try to find people, if you have people in your own group, which some of us have cut off a lot of those people because it gets pretty heated, but if you do have people in your own, you know, community that you can have a really good conversation with and go back and forth with, that's a really good thing to do, especially if you're coming from a place where you know both of you care about each other and you know they're really just coming and saying their sides. Now it's a really good time to kind of, instead of leaning more into the self and me and, you know, lean into the, you know, collectively, how can we come together to work things out and come together, because it is a real problem. And also people are just really afraid of, you know, what may happen, what could potentially come to pass if people are not communicating and talking, because we just get further and further apart, and then you can get to the point where there's zero communication, and we kind of don't want to get that way, and we really don't have to, because we do have the tools to be able to communicate and to persuade and all of those things, so we should be using them. Another thing is shielding is really important. Now there are times where there are just toxic people, especially if you go online. Super toxic. Facebook right now to me is just like insanely toxic, and Twitter's always been toxic. So I mean, not to hate on them, but you know, that's pretty much how that's my personal feelings, and maybe it's not yours, but you know, there are some spaces like I thought that Facebook used to be like a really great space for that, but I've been seeing more kind of crazy on that. So there are times where you just have to shield yourself. You have to shield yourself from the negativity. You have to shield yourself from aggression and anger from other people. A lot more people, like I said, with this Mars and Aries energy are coming up individually. A lot of your friends who maybe never really took a stance on things and didn't say how they felt about many things are actually coming out and saying it, and then people are coming for them and attacking them and things like that. So sometimes you just got to block people, you know, unfriend people. You know, if you're going to make a post that you know really is going to trigger somebody and they're going to act like an asshole, just, you know, don't put them in that post. I've like on my Facebook, I have a lot of interesting ways of like keeping certain people off some posts and certain people on some posts, and then sometimes I'll post about like cats and everybody can see that. So you know, you have to do that, and this is the time. I don't think that it will always be that way. I'm not telling people to censor themselves. I definitely do not in any way, shape, or form agree with like censoring of information and censoring of words and thoughts. I believe everybody should be saying what they want to say, whether I agree with it or not. You know, as long as it's not like a call to action to cause harm for people, which is never okay. So that is kind of where I draw the line in terms of myself, but we all have different things that we think are important, and you know, you have to use your filter. That's why you have them, so absolutely use them. Mars retrograde energy and in Aries is just getting rid of all of the things that are kind of non-essential that might be stressing you out. So it reminds me a lot of like when you have a cold or something, or you have an infection and you get a fever. And so a lot of times the way that most people treat fever is they take like Tylenol, they take aspirin for it because they want to get rid of the fever. But actually there's a lot of people, especially if they practice like homeopathic medicine, that will let, depending upon how high the fever is and what your other symptoms are, you know, let the fever run for a little bit, because it's actually like, that's what your body does. It's your body's natural mechanism to like kind of killing off bacteria, virus, whatever it is that's running in your system. And so if we're thinking about that, and we're thinking about Mars, because Mars represents that heat and that burning out of the things that no longer are serving us in work, and that could include people too. So just eliminate the excess baggage in your life. It's one less thing that you have to stress about, one less thing that you have to worry about during hard times when you're kind of having this like a little bit more of a struggle to kind of sort of pull in your energy all together and direct it in one way, because Mars Aries specifically is cardinal energy, so it's like fire energy, and it's also directed in a way, like you're actually like pushing your energy where you want to push it. Right now during a retrograde period, it's really hard to kind of aim your energy, so it's like sporadic energy going all over the place, which is why it can kind of spill over into many places and hurt people, hurt yourself and things. So you just want to actually like kind of hone it in a little bit and focus if you can. And if that's too much for you, the other thing would be to relax, to take walks, to take long baths, to go in the ocean, do exercise. Aries usually, and Mars energy is all about like the athlete, so it's like hard workouts. It's like, sporadic bursts of energy. So I say go against that. Try to do movement. You still want to move your body because you're going to need to, because you're going to be feeling a lot of that frustration and that kind of chaotic, crazy energy, but move your body in ways that are soothing and comfortable and nice for you. So now is not the time to be training for the triathlon and stuff like that. That might just be too much for you, and if it is, just go to do something that's like a little bit easier and a little more relaxed. Like essentially it in terms of what I wanted to talk about today for working with this energy. I just want you guys to stay safe out there. That's really, the most important thing. And if you have like weirdos and creepy people that are, because this also, retrograde seasons, no matter what planet goes retrograde, in my opinion, in my life and in my client's life, I feel like there's always like a return of somebody that's a little creepy or that's a little weird, or just a relationship that maybe didn't work out the way that it would. You kind of loop back to those things. So if you find yourself like looping back into people that were kind of toxic in your life, or not really helpful, or not really good in your life, just kind of let those people go. Because really what you're looking at, even though it might feel good for a minute, you're actually going to be kind of doing this dance of, I don't want to say the dance of destruction, but you're definitely going to be doing a dance that you're not going to really like. It's not going to work out really in your favor, and it's going to end up being more frustrating and irritating. I was going to say also one last thing that I didn't say that I just remembered is the battle of the aggressive and the passive aggressive. Because Mars is retrograde, passive aggressiveness could be at an all-time high. So those little digs, those friends, family members, all the people that kind of sort of have those backhanded compliments and all of those kinds of things might be rearing its ugly head. So it's okay to call those people out and shut them down if you need to. And if you feel like, okay, maybe this isn't a good time for a call out, because if I do call out, it might not land. It might just go with I'm going to, one up you, because this is the one up time. You might just want to just silence them, do what you need to do, but also kind of, I'm not saying like expect tragedies or expect fights, but this is the time for that. So you just want to be prepared with know that if you put something out there, somebody's going to jump on it and come back at you. So if you don't feel like, scrapping, then you might not want to put it out there at this time. So thank you guys so much for joining. I will be putting this on my IGTV so that you guys can see it. I'll also put it on my YouTube. If you have any questions, you can just comment below when I put it on YouTube or Instagram. If you guys want to have a tarot reading during this Mars retrograde time, if you have anything that's going on, feel free to contact me at any of the information on Instagram, The Wild Wahine. You can email me, kaylani@thewildwahine.com, and you can also go to my online scheduler, which is going to be in my bio. And if you have any other questions, feel free to DM or leave a message or email me. If you have anything that you want to share, or if you want to share how Mars retrograde has been wreaking havoc on your life, I'm here to listen. I'm here to give tips. I'll be giving tips, throughout the rest of this 3-month period, as I do every week. So thank you guys so much for joining in, and have a wonderful and safe rest of your week, and I will see you guys next Wednesday.